Hello and welcome to another teissTalk. It is Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. No, it's Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. I normally do the Thursday show, and so my brain is hardwired to say it's Thursday at 4 p.m. It is, of course, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Don't panic. You've still got a few days left of the week. I'm your host, author and investigative journalist Jeff White. I do normally Thursdays. Normally Jenny Radcliffe, my co-host, does Tuesdays, but we've swapped this week because I will be indisposed on Thursday. And the reason I'll be indisposed is I'm having the launch party for my book, which is here, by the way. I have written a book. It is being published on Thursday. I'm very, very excited about that. So hello to everybody who's only turned up to see if you can win a free copy of said book, which we'll be giving away during this session, a free signed copy, no less, of the Lazarus Heist book, which is all about how North Korea became a computer hacking superpower and the story of the Lazarus Group, North Korea's government hackers, and their crazy interactions with the world of organized crime and organized cybercrime. It's a really, really fantastic tale. I'm very glad to be having out. So welcome to those of you, as I say, who cynically only attended to see if you can win a copy of the book. Hello, though, to our regular attendees. It's great to have you all here. And hello to anybody who's new. If you are new, do stick your hand up and say hello and talk to us. Oh, I couldn't see where all the chat was, but there you go. Good. So listen, we are going to be giving away a copy of the book during this session, which is going to be about, by the way, demonstrating effectiveness in managing cyber risk, with emphasis on demonstrating effectiveness. So we're going to be talking about that in a sec, but obviously we need to kind of get onto this book giveaway first. And I was thinking how best to do it. And I wondered if the best way to do it might be, there's a book, it's not one of mine, it's not my book or one of the previous book that I wrote, it's somebody else's book. And it's a classic. And whenever somebody says to me, hey, let's recommend a good book, a good cybersecurity book, I always recommend this one. It is a classic of the genre. It is a brilliant book. You may well have read it yourself. If anybody can guess at the title of that book, it's a classic cybersecurity book, a classic cybersecurity tale. If you know what this book is, if you can guess to it, then you win a free signed copy of the Lazarus Heist. Stick your guesses in the chat. And at the end, we'll see who gets it right. If you've got a favorite cybersecurity book of your own, by the way, do stick it in the chat, because either it might be the right answer to the question I've just posed, or it might be a book that I can have a look at and that we can all learn from. So do stick your book recommendations in the chat, even if you're not sure which book it is. And hello to all of you in the chat for getting involved. Tendai, welcome to you, new person. Great to see you here. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live at 4 p.m. All the talks are archived, by the way, on the teissTalk website, teiss.co.uk, to look back at all of the stuff that we've done. But live is where it's definitely happening. So hello to all of you. By the way, if you want to get involved in the chat, there is the Q&A up in the Q&A bit. So please do drop your questions in there, particularly about our key topic today, demonstrating cyber risk awareness, demonstrating cyber effectiveness. And we shall see how we go. Some suggestions coming in for the book, which is interesting. Not sure it's any of those. Do keep guessing if you want a signed copy of the Lazarus Heist, and we'll sort that out. All right, well, listen, let's move on to the matter in hand. We've got a great panel to be talking to us today. As I say, demonstrating effectiveness in managing cyber risk is our key topic. We're going to be hearing later on from Nick Harris, who's Director of InfoSec and Cyber Resilience at Oxford Nanopore Technologies, and also Ash Hunt, who's Group Head of InfoSec at Sarn Group. But for the moment, I want to welcome our first guest, who's Benjamin Call, who's VP of Cybersecurity at Coates, who's joining us from wherever Benjamin is joining us from. Benjamin also is exempted as a guest from the guessing of the book, but can give his suggestions as to cybersecurity books he's liked. Hopefully, Benjamin will be joining us very shortly. Although I can't see. Oh, there we go. He's popped up. Hi, Benjamin. How are you?
Well, apparently I'm exempt, so I'm a forget joining and talking.
Not for guests. I'm sorry, Benjamin. If that means you want to storm out in a half and not do it, then now's your chance.
Well, then I'm gone. I mean, forget the pre-order of the book that I have. I'm gonna cancel that thing now too.
Got some good suggestions for books coming through here. Actually, a few people. So yeah, if you've got suggestions of just books we should know about, do stick them in the chat. It's always interesting getting more books. Benjamin, have you got a classic tome or classic book that you would enjoy cybersecurity wise?
I always start with the Cuckoo's Egg. That is the first one that really can get people interested. It's that hook. It is told in such a way to be enticing. So that is
Oh, hang on. Have I lost Benjamin, or has everybody else lost me? I'm not quite sure. There's a question in the Q&A already. Oh, Tendai's put The Art of Invisibility by Kevin Mitnick in the Q&A. There we go. I'm hoping I'm not just sort of talking into the ether and that people can hear me. And maybe the problem is at Benjamin's side. Maybe our Tice Goblin could drop me a line in the chat to see whether I'm still online and going strong. Let's have a quick look and see. Oh, there we go. I think Benjamin's internet may have dropped off. Look, okay, so we've got some good book suggestions. Let's go to our book club while we're there. So here we go. So we've got Cult of the Dead Cow by Rebecca Massey. That is yes, that is a good one. We've also got Cover of the Cuckoo's Egg, the Kevin Mitnick book, The Art of Invisibility. Benjamin, Sandworm. You've read that? I still haven't. I've got it on my shelf. What's Sandworm like?
See, I stormed out. I didn't like that. No, it's the what, Ukrainian?
Yes.
Not Ukrainian. The ransomware with the spinning up the ransomware, destroying the plutonium.
Yeah. Oh yes. There's also Countdown to Zero, which is Kim Zetter's book about the Stuxnet one, isn't there?
Yes. Oh my goodness, Stuxnet. Why was that eluding me? So absolutely.
Right. Was a few years back anyway. Yeah. Well, listen, Benjamin, let's before we start talking about the topic in hand, there's a news story that caught your eye this week, which is kind of tangential to our related to our topic in hand. And this is, I think our Tice Goblin can throw this one up on the screen. This is from Tech Republic, techrepublic.com. Headline: Zero Trust leaders avert 5 cyber disasters per year on average. So this is a survey from a cybersecurity company called Illumio, who've got their Zero Trust Impact Report. And it said that leaders that employ Zero Trust architecture thwart 5 major cyber attacks per year, and says they save their organizations an average of $20 million annually. Benjamin, why did this one catch your eye? What is about this that you picked up?
Right. Well, I do a bit of reading on Zero Trust. Is it a buzzword? Yeah, absolutely. Because you are going to have to trust something. But I think it really comes down to, explicit trust. But, the thing that quickly jumped out on that article that you just had up there was the statement from the top, allegedly, it is a survey of 1,000 IT and security professionals. 47%, so half of them say they do not believe that their organization will be breached. They believe that they are, they've built a program or something that is in place. Perhaps they feel that they're so far along in their Zero Trust journey that of these 1,000 people surveyed, half of them say they do not believe that they are going to become a victim of any type of major breach. And I just scratch my head and think, not play, Chicken Little, sky is falling, but every time I'm talking with my executive team, with my board of directors, it's not an if, it's a when. That's not trying to live a negative life by any means, but there will be something that happens, an opportunistic attacker, I'm sorry. There's going to be something at some point, that we just did not see that is then able to be used against us, that is going to cause an issue. So for me to sit there and say, I think we have done everything we need to do, we are not a target. That is a very scary place for me to be as head of cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you write in the article, 47% said they do not believe they will be breached despite increasingly sophisticated frequent attacks, it says the article. And I wonder about that. I wonder whether, so what sort of explains that? Do you think that 47% is actually the honest answer? Because I think when you ask most people, they will give the answer that you give, which is, oh, it's not if, it's when, nobody can be sure, nothing's 100%. But maybe it's when people are asked anonymously, their actual answer is, well, no, actually, I don't. If I can answer anonymously and give the honest answer without my name being attached to it, I'd say, no, I don't think I'm going to be breached. Do you think there's an actual honesty about that statistic?
No, and I thought that as well. It's you hit somebody up on the road, on the sidewalk, and you're asking them questions. Do you get that honest answer? You ask people, will you tell me your password, or will they actually give it to you on a sidewalk, thinking that you'll never get to it? So there could be that sincerity. Are they thinking that it's security through obscurity? But I really think this is why security awareness is so paramount to change in thoughts, to change in mindsets. The SANS Institute used to have that "you are a target," and each and every one of us who's operating, you have an email address, you're on the internet. As soon as you're connected to the internet, you truly are a target. And to sit here and say, I don't have enough, I'm not important enough. The money that I have in my bank account isn't enough for somebody to target me. I think that is a very scary place for, scary mindset for you to be in, thinking that I don't have to do proper cyber hygiene, setting strong passwords, enabling multi-factor, making sure that your systems are running up to date on their software, not updating your phone or your mobile device but once a year, because you think you're not a target. And it's one thing for an employee, for a finance person or an HR person, but these were the IT and the security folks. And for them to have that thought process, again, I've said it a couple times. For me, that's a scary mindset.
Yeah. Well, Daniela's put an interesting question in the chat. Thanks for this, Daniela, which is a throwdown, a gauntlet for the teissTalk audience. Can you launch a poll to answer the same question here? Well, Daniela, your wish is my command. I think we can do that. I think with our Thais Goblin, we can say, let's say the question is in the first, hang on, there's a poll open, which is, would you rather be present to witness your birth or be at your witness at your funeral? In mine. Anyway, look, we're going to put a new poll up there. And the new poll is going to be, do you think in the next year you will be breached? That's the question. Do you think in the next year you will be breached, as in a cybersecurity breach? Because in this article, it doesn't sort of say the timescale. It just says of the surveyed 1,000 IT and security professionals across 8 countries, 47% said they do not believe they will be breached. So that was all the information that they gave us. So that poll is up there. Cast your votes. Be interesting to see what the Thais audience make from that. I mean, there's other stats in here, Benjamin, which I find interesting. I mean, it goes on to say, within the last 2 years, 76% of organizations surveyed said they had been a target in a ransomware attack. 66% experienced at least one software supply chain attack. So given how many of them have said, look, we have been attacked, again, that 47% saying we don't think it's going to hit us, it's even more bizarre from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think that really comes down to, definitions. And how do you see this? And do you think you'll be breached? Well, will I have a compromised machine? Yes. Yeah. Is one machine considered a breach? Yeah. Is it an incident versus major incident? Yeah. Do I have to report it to the ICO? No, therefore it wasn't a real breach. Material breach, if you will. Therefore, maybe that is why people, the 47% or 470ish people said no, we will not be breached in the next year, because they're saying it won't hit a level of again material breach.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, thanks for that, Daniela. You've had a little chance to vote. We've got the results of that, which I think we can stick up on screen. Yes, 77%. So we should take the no figure, because compared to the 47% that Illumio got, we've got 23%. So a slightly more pessimistic teissTalk audience, or maybe a more realistic, who knows. I should say Illumio, I did look, I hadn't come across Illumio, I did look them up, and they are a zero trust sort of cybersecurity consultancy. So I have to say they're trumpet blowing for zero trust. I think maybe comes from a position of commercial priority there, Benjamin. I don't know whether you spotted that one.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing, is you can make numbers, statistics are fascinating, but you can make them work in your favor. You can make them tell almost any story that you want.
Yeah. So. Interesting. Good stuff. Well, that's fantastic, and thanks, Andrea, for that thought. Really good thought to do the poll here. We're going to bring in our other panelists on this. We've got Nick Harris, who's Director of InfoSec and Cyber Resilience at Oxford Nanopore, and we've got Ash Hunt, who's Group Head of InfoSec at Sarn Group. Hello to both of you. Nick, where are you joining? It looks like you've been dragged into the office there, Nick. Are you joining us in the office?
I have for a change, actually. Yeah.
Unless I was thinking maybe you've done your house up to look exactly like an office environment. Kind of weird.
I love ceiling tiles. Who doesn't want ceiling tiles on their own ceiling? Yeah. So I'm based in Oxford. So it's actually nice to be in. We don't come in that often, but I've managed to find a spare room to have this call from, which is good.
Nice, fantastic. You've pulled rank. That is really good. And by the way, we're going to put the speakers' LinkedIn profiles in the chat for you guys. Ash, how are you doing? You're also, I presume, unless your home decoration is very peculiar, you're also in the office, I take it.
No, yeah, I made a rare venture into the office this morning.
Good for you. Good. And by the way, Ash, Sarn Group, just give us the once over. I think Oxford Nanopore we had on before, but Sarn Group I haven't. Give us the overview of Sarn Group and what they do.
So Sarn is a FTSE 250 alternative asset and fund administrator. So we've got about £500 billion AUM and about 2,500 users. But interestingly, we are in the process of merging at the moment with a much larger financial services organization in the same space called Apex Group. So we'll be getting a lot bigger and more complex very quickly.
And does that, Ash, impact on you in your role as group head of InfoSec by any chance?
Yes, yeah, massively. Yes. Not only me, but the rest of my colleagues in the technology leadership. It's an extremely challenging time, but it's also a great opportunity as well to almost do a reset of how we structure and build technology in a major financial services organization.
Yeah. Well, good. Glad, Ash, that we've managed to grab you before your life gets seemingly quite a bit more hectic. Ash, can I stay with you on this article that we looked at? As I say, 47% saying they don't think they're going to be breached. Benjamin and I chatted a bit about this. What did you make of it? And indeed the other findings about how many had actually been hit.
I mean, I think Benjamin probably answered it pretty well, right, around the point of statistics. I mean, surveys are notorious for extrapolating the information that the surveyor perhaps wants to push for a particular message. And I've not come across many CISOs in the sort of global family, let's say, that would attest to such a high stat for saying that they won't. I mean, the truth is, it's just not a binary question. Every organization that engages in activity, which is every single organization globally, is probable to be breached in some form or another. The question is, and I suppose our jobs is working out which are the more probable loss scenarios and which aren't, and to ensure that we divert our investment and attention to the ones that are going to cause the greatest amount of loss exposure for the business. What I do think, though, is often that's not necessarily all of the sexy APTs and threats that cybersecurity professionals like to think about. It's often the mundane. Sorry, I could have added 5 more words to the end of the sentence to allow you to finish your...
It's okay. I thought I'll sneak in a quick sip of tea before this. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. Going back on that to you, Nick, then, because Ash raised a good point of, the kind of questions you ask, it often dictates the kind of answers you get. Nick, have you been on the receiving end of surveys like this one? And how do you go about, A, deciding whether you're going to answer, and B, deciding what answer you're going to give?
Yeah, and there's that anonymous point that you raise as well. Yeah, you see these questions all the time, and they start becoming quite leading questions to some degree, don't they? Or they seed one question and then there's a follow-on question. So you're starting to frame the way the person answers. So it's an art to write a question that is accurate and going to give you some results, let alone try and answer it. And people have got their own motivations for answering. Maybe it's an embarrassment question. Maybe there's an agenda behind it. Or maybe it's the more sort of psychological side. There's that sort of normalization of risk. Maybe that's why the numbers are so low. Maybe they weren't hit yesterday, therefore they think they'll never be hit. It's just that kind of, why do people live on top of Yosemite National Park and not Yellowstone? Just because it didn't blow yesterday doesn't mean it's not going to blow tomorrow. People just kind of live in that comfort, naivety sometimes.
Yes, interesting. Although not it seems a lot of our teissTalk viewers. Good stuff. Let's move on to a topic in hand. We're going to be talking about demonstrating effectiveness in managing cyber risk, which is slightly related to the news article. But I mean, it's an interesting question because it comes down to something we have looked at in other sort of sessions. And I want to come back to you on this, Benjamin, in terms of, I mean, obviously taking the risk-based approach. One of my sort of bugbears with that, and I'm not a practitioner in the industry, obviously, is I understand how those compliance tick box things have a bad reputation, but at least if there's tick box stuff, you can measure it and you can say, well, we've ticked X number of the boxes. If you're taking this sort of risk-based approach, there is a quantifying, there's a measuring aspect to it, Benjamin. I just wonder how you go about sort of solving that problem. Oh, I think we may have lost Ben again. I've got a frozen thing. Nick, can I come to you with the same question then? As I say, in terms of risk, we're trying to measure it. We're trying to measure the effectiveness of it. That means measuring stuff. How do you go about sort of recording it and gathering that data?
Yeah, we do where we can trends really, because a snapshot in time can only tell you one story. And then the way you break those trends down is who are we actually trying to explain the risk and define that risk? Who are we trying to explain it to? So, for example, when we're talking to our staff, we'll gamify it. So, how many people have been engaging in our training or sort of simulated phishing campaigns, team against team. So we sort of do some trends against those. Who's moving, who's up. If we're talking to sort of the senior leadership across IT, it's a bit more technical level. We're talking about vulnerability count, time to patch. We're starting to get sort of a different fidelity in the indicators of risk. It's very. You can get quite high level when you talk about risk quite quickly and it becomes meaningless sometimes, and there's a place for that. But with the technology team, we try and sort of break it down to sort of trend numbers that are useful to them. And then when it's the board, you do actually go high level, because actually what are they after? They're trying to balance off, like Ash was saying, mergers. They're moving into new markets. There are all sorts of different aspects of risk, and business continuity, which sort of I think InfoSec does fall quite nicely into. And you're trying to then put that in the right language that they can get the head around. And if you're after more money off them, then that's the sort of the message and what you're trying to sort of present to them.
Yeah, interesting. By the way, you'll have noticed we've lost Benjamin. We had some connectivity issues with Benjamin. We're trying to bring him back through the pipes of the internet. I'm sure he'll be joining us again soon. But Ash, can I come to you on this, because I've slightly skipped forward, haven't I, in terms of measuring the effectiveness of cyber risk. Obviously, you've got to then work out what risks you're defending against. You've got to do a sort of risk assessment type thing first. Talk us through how that works for you guys at Sarn Group and how you've tackled that.
I mean, I've spent the last sort of 6 years working in quantitative modeling in cyber risk in one form or another throughout my roles, and I'm focused entirely on building a purely quantitative program at Sarn. It comes back to your point around, you can take a million different measurements that you choose to, right? But it's working out which are the effective scales of measurement for measuring the things that we really care about. So absolutely, we've got a threat landscape at the organization. We have a technology risk methodology, which I wrote for the organization, which is actually beginning to be infused as well through the other risk functions and profiles throughout the organization. But that simply looks at building out loss scenarios, which takes a threat profile, a threat event, so the kind of activity causing damage, our assets, our vulnerabilities and types of loss exposure. And then we go through a process where we look at running assumptions, calibrated estimates, which we pull in from subject matter experts, industry data, empirical data internally. So incident data is a really good example. Looking at things like hits over misses, that's a good ratio, working out how probable the event is to occur. And then we look at using sort of volatility analysis, looking at range estimates for our types of losses. So, if we look at primary loss, it might be the losses associated with productivity, so downtime. It could be the cost of responding to an incident, replacing any technology, people. I've been involved in occasions with terminations and new hires involved as a result of incidents. And then you've all got those secondary losses that we measure as well, right? So reputational damage, stock price volatility is a good example of that. Legal and regulatory fines. I say to people all the time, GDPR fines are mostly public, so you can easily get a pretty good PERT average of those. But also, mainly for us as a business as well, competitive advantage. So if we were to suffer an incident, the loss that we would suffer in losing clients, but also our competitors would gain in gaining those clients, would put our business back quite far, potentially, depending on the incident in the industry. So we have to be really careful in measuring that. And then we simply run Monte Carlo analysis to simulate all of the probable outcomes of all of those estimates. And then we have a distribution which we can go to the board with and say, in the next year we're going to lose X amount, we're probable to lose X amount of money or more based on this scenario. And that gives us a really useful mechanism to then model control investment, which is how we address the risk.
Yeah. Question one, what is Monte Carlo analysis? I've never heard that before.
So it's a really effective technique. It was developed in, I think, around 1946, particularly when the US were developing the atomic bomb. And the very reason behind it being is it's a massive calculator that takes random samples from different forms of range estimates that you're basically feeding a model. And the reason being is that the US were investing so much money in an atomic bomb. It was so costly to create, and also they couldn't be dropping it everywhere without, obviously, the enemy picking up on it and causing, complete damage. That they needed to find a model that could simulate the outcomes of the bomb without actually having to do it in real life. And this approach was developed based on, taking the name from the Monte Carlo, casino and gambling. And nowadays, obviously, we can do it in Excel, Python, whatever you want. And it's basically just doing random sampling. So it gives us, if you think about it, basically the ability to simulate a risk scenario thousands of times over in a very, very quick model. Which, to Nick's point, right, helps alleviate the problem of the traditional approaches which rely on ordinal scales, which take a snapshot in time with probably the wrong scales of measurement anyway, which can't really describe the fact that risk is always about forecasting. It's all uncertainty analysis. It's trying to capture an understanding of how we reduce our uncertainty. And that uncertainty changes constantly. So we have to have models that can reflect that uncertainty and help us to reduce it in order to make effective decisions.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it does. I mean, so if I got this right, Ash, you've and I'll get Nick to pick up on this afterwards. But you've been through different types of threat that you might be faced with, and what the possible ramifications of that are, and then what the knock-on effect that would be for the profitability of the business, for your competitiveness, and so on, for churn of staff, etc., etc. That does sound like a fuck of a lot of work. I mean, how long does that sounds like a massive exercise?
Well, I can tell you from working in particularly big financial service organizations how many hours and people's jobs expend on doing a compliance tick box exercise, and that lot of work delivers almost zero value add. So it's more about how are you purposing your people's time and effort into.
I wasn't saying that, by the way. I wasn't saying that as a criticism, but it sounds like a big thing. It just sounds like a huge bit of work,
Just making it's a really good question. No, 100%. I'm not getting emotional. I'm sort of making the comparison right there. Because I get this a lot. People hear those ideas and think it's just too complex and too weighty. We don't have the data. All of those myths have already been debunked. And it's more about a methodological mindset shift into a different scales of measurement and a different model. That's all it really is at the end of the day. And to be honest, creating a threat landscape is pretty straightforward, right? You've got a set of adversarial type of profiles, organized criminal groups, nation states, hacktivists. You've got your accidental ones, internal actors, maybe suppliers and things like this that might be in your organization. And you've got environmental. I think I mentioned yesterday to you, right? We've got jurisdictions in places with high rate of hurricanes. So flooding, wind damage to our offices and, even as it used to be data centers, that was problematic. So you map those out, and that's all just methodology. Your CMDB is your asset registry. Your vulnerability scanning tool is your vulnerability management tool that feeds in your vulnerabilities or your, control performance. So it's not, you can make this work for you. And to be honest, these models can run the simulations in 20 seconds. So it's more about, yes, it would, if you sit down, it might take you a few days to really map all this out and start thinking about the scenarios that are important to you. But once you've got the model set up, the most important thing is, and I say this to people all the time, the day you'll be worst at it is the day you start. Because to your point, right, how do you measure the effectiveness of your own risk management program? Well, this model is a continuous feedback loop. You can go back 6 months later and say, well, were my assumptions about that risk actually correct? Did they borne out in reality? And you go, okay, so I need to tweak and move forward. So it's about having that continuous feedback loop to improve your decision making under uncertainty.
Interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Ash. Really interesting. Nick, can I come to you on this? I'm just interested how this compares to the approach at Oxford Nanopore. Similar, different, how does it strike you?
Very, very different. I would love to be in Ash's shoes, actually, in the maturity of the organization to kind of comprehend that degree of risk analysis. I'm surrounded by academics, incredibly intelligent people and PhDs, but risk isn't their strong suit. So for us, it's about putting something across that they get So if I'm talking to the developers and their applications, actually we said, well, we can do a degree of risk modeling. Some of them are public facing, some of them are internal, therefore there's a degree of profile there. But actually we just picked out core controls. And have you got these types of controls in place for your applications that you're building, including do you run sort of application code scanning and you picking things up through that way? And so we sort of try and boil it down to something they can comprehend, really. And that seems to work quite well, because they sort of they can get that. It's sort of a developer's backlog type task that they can go, okay, well, I need to add that in, and I'll do that on the next run. And then when it comes to the board, well, the rest of the organization do like their 5x5 grids. So we have to sort of fit to that to some degree. And those models of 5x5 grids are flawed to so many degrees, but at least you can compare one risk to another in a visible degree. And okay, you can probably manipulate whether yours is a 3 or a 5, but you can kind of at least compare, contrast, and say, actually, today this is our biggest risk for this reason. And you're just trying to put a little bit of an image to the narrative you're trying to get across, because I think Ash is probably driving to that point as well. Is you can do all the numbers and you can pictorially display it how you want, but really it's the narrative you're trying to get to. How are you going to tap into their psyche to get them to understand this? Well, hopefully what they don't see as a dark art of cybersecurity, but to sort of understand possibly something that isn't so familiar to them, so that they can get what you're trying to do and help you in your sort of own endeavors.
I wonder whether some of this comes down then to cultural differences between the bodies that you're working for. So Ash, the folks that you're working for and working with are probably well used to the sort of procedures that you're going through and the sort of outcomes that you're coming out with, and explaining it to them and how you've reached those conclusions might be a little bit easier than for somebody like Nick, who's working with a slightly different set of people who come from an academic background. Ash, do you think that's the case, that the culture of the organization is going to maybe shape how you measure and talk about things?
I've not found that to be the case in my experience, and I've worked, I used to work for government, so that was a very, very different, sort of environment, particularly to financial services, and I've worked in other, ICS environments, etc. For me, almost any C-suite are familiar with financial discipline. Right? They understand, distributions. They understand mathematics. What they do really struggle with was when, let's say, the business was experiencing a type of incident more than one time a year. The risk matrix just isn't able to capture frequency in that sense. What happens when you've got 3 reds? It's very difficult to determine, if not impossible, between the extent of those 3 reds of which one to address. We also found major issues with biases when we would go out to engineers or analysts, and we might say, what do you think about these problems? And they go, oh, they're all red, or because they think everything's burning, or they go, oh God, they're all green, because they don't want to be on the hook for saying something's bad. So we found that completely, an impossible way to find reliable data inputs. What is really clear, though, is that risk always manifests in monetary loss. Always. It'll always cause the business some sort of financial damage. And I've done modeling in this case before, even in health and safety. Okay, as much as it's crass to talk about it, that is what it manifests for the business. And our main investment mechanism is through expenditure in control improvements as cybersecurity professionals. So it seems eminently sensible to have a mechanism which is able to articulate that probable extent of monetary loss exposure, and then how your investments are going to contribute in reducing that. And that seems to cut across multiple lexicon and language disciplines, rather than me going to them and saying, I've got 100 CVSS as critical. We need to, you need to give me another 500K to address this. And, to Nick's point, right, there's absolutely some fundamental stuff that no matter what organization you are, you need to be doing, right? And, CIS Top 20 are a great example of that, right? It's just like, you wouldn't run an environment without passwords and probably MFA, really, if you're true about it. You need a baseline configuration standard, good golden imaging, all this kind of stuff, right? You just wouldn't do it without it. But when you kind of get beyond that foundation, that baseline foundational set of controls, it then becomes really tricky because we're always cash strapped as CISOs, and we need to then divert money in the right area and defend why we've done it. And operating on the basis that we're always going to have an incident is a good start point, because then we're never going to be fired, hopefully, or at least have at least a good podium to justify our decision making. But it is critical to be able to look ahead and think, actually, where is the business losing money? And as I said, in most cases, it's accidental threats, it's user error, misconfiguration, and just poor design. So that's really where we need to focus on.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Ash. And we've got Benjamin back, and I'm hoping Benjamin is receiving us. Or is Benjamin frozen again in a look of intense concentration? Yes, I think he might have done. I'm so sorry about this, folks. It does happen every now and again. We are obviously beholden to what the internet can deliver up to us. Yeah, we'll try and get Benjamin back. I know our Tice Goblin is beaving away. By the way, got some good suggestions for books actually in the chat. So if anybody's got more cybersecurity book club suggestions, we could do a book club. Can we TiceTalk book club? That'd be absolutely fantastic. So apologies, we are going to try and bring Benjamin Call back, who's a VP of cybersecurity at Coates. There's a question here in the notes I've got that Nick, I want to throw at you, even though I don't quite understand it. So maybe you can help this to some degree. The question is, what is your InfoSec goal? Risk reduction or risk management? Can you help me out? Because I read the question. I've got no idea what it means, but so you presumably do. What's your thoughts on that?
I read the question too and was equally flummoxed. I think the goal has got to be risk reduction, but the way you do that is through risk management. That's probably how I would sort of carve that question back up. You can't manage what you can't monitor, so you got to monitor. You got to have an understanding of your landscape. But ultimately, you're trying to reduce it down to some degree of board tolerance. And
I suppose there's an acknowledgement, Nick, in the question, isn't there, that you can't get rid of all risks. At some stage, that the amount you'd have to spend and the amount you'd have to do to get rid of all risks is obviously insane, isn't going to happen. So it's working out which ones you're prepared to put up with and how you mitigate them when they happen. Is that how we approach the question? That there are risks that really are a when, and there are risks that we can say, well, it's an if, that we can make that risk an if, not a when. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, possibly. I think a lot of probably cybersecurity professionals would probably say that most are whens. And very few are ifs. And I think that there is a point where, the lower down, the more and more you sort of reduce the risk, it's sort of limited returns to the investment you put in. There's an exponential curve on that, but it becomes more and more difficult to get down sort of nearer that zero. Sort of the first 80% maybe is 20% the effort, and vice versa. But I think it's hard. I think the question that organizations would have to sort of just get their head around really is, if they can, where's their threshold? And is that something by monetary value? Then that's great. You can sort of have a degree and really say, well, we're investing that and you're coming across here. Is it a type of scenario that you want to focus on more than the other? Because actually you think that's more prevalent, more likely. But ultimately, I think if you speak to any sort of pen tester, they would say it's just a matter of time that eventually they'll get in if they're determined enough. And maybe some organizations sort of, it's how you then grapple with that. And
interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Nick. Benjamin is back with us. Benjamin, can you hear us? Are you online? Are you receiving? We've got Benjamin in video, but apparently not audio. Ash, can I come to you on this one? I mean, who knows? It might be a bollocks question, but do you see something in this risk reduction versus risk management? Does that make a bit more sense to you, or are you as flummoxed as Nick and I are by that?
I mean, all I'd say is, there's no such thing as zero risk. Any organization engaging in any form of activity will breed risk as a result of doing things. And we can't coddle ourselves into some bubble. It's just not realistic. So, absolutely, for me, risk management is about having risk analysis and modeling integrated with decision making and actions. If I'm not actually being able to take decisions as a result of my analysis and modeling, then my risk management program is not really working. And ultimately, it's about reducing the loss exposure of the business. At the end of the day, I want the business, I always think of the CISO's role as a sort of revenue enablement officer, because my goal is to make the business continue to grow and be as profitable as it can be. How do I do that? Well, I stop it losing money and prevent it from losing money, hopefully. And how do I do that? Well, we do the modeling, work out where it is losing money, and we put the controls in place to help address that. So, for me, it's all about integrating the work that we do in risk with decision making and action.
Yeah. Interesting. Ash, can I stay with you on this one? There's another question here, which I don't know whether we can drill it down this way, drill it down like this, but the question is, which metrics best demonstrate where cyber risk is being managed? Have you got? I mean, you've mapped out a really interesting sort of picture, I think, at San Group, and one that from what Nick said, I think other people might be envious with. But coming out of that, obviously, you've got a really good visibility and a good spread. But is there a particular section of that works really well?
I'd just say is I haven't not necessarily got brilliant comprehensive coverage and visibility, right? It's this is something every CISO works hard graft day in, day out to gain. This is about a methodology and an approach that we take to risk analysis and modeling. It's nothing more than that. But in terms of metrics, right, it's certainly one of the goals that I've got for the technology operation and security control program that I run at SAN is continuous controls monitoring. And I was fortunate enough to do a 9-month really in-depth POV at a major bank on this previously, where my goal was to basically build API connections to systems that were operationalizing controls. So, for example, if your change management controls are being ran in ServiceNow, define some data fields on those change controls that you think are the things that measure that, and then pull that data in on a continuous basis and just into a platform or a terminal. So we were able to look at things like the number of changes executed that didn't have approval over the numbers of changes that had approval. That gave us a ratio of the operating effectiveness of change request approvals. So having a very granular understanding of what a control is, how it's performed, how its design can be measured, and how its operating effectiveness can be measured is crucial. And for me, those controls and the fluctuation in their efficacy is what is really a KRI. It's because ultimately your loss exposure will increase and decrease based on the efficacy of your controls. So for me, your controls are everything. Look back to Nick's point, right? If you can get those right, they are the biggest value add in terms of measurement that you can gain. But I also think, again, people, particularly in our industry and profession, love to talk about our SIEM logs, right? And there's, hundreds of bits of analytics and I've got lots of glitzy tools that do lots of great things. I often spend my time with vendors saying, I don't care about any of those metrics. They don't mean anything to me in the context of risk. They might be a very small data point, but it's going to be fed up well into another form of estimate. I actually think where information security would be better purposed is having maybe a business analyst in their team that went out and looked at measuring things like revenue generation for core critical applications in the business and looking at how important those are. Because when a risk happens, it's typically going to be impacting some part of a business process or a whole business process. And so actually having that understanding of the loss exposure and impact on the business is equally as valuable as learning things like the kind of frequency piece that we get a lot, particularly around SecOps and of most of our dashboards and monitoring tools. But again, control work is, if you get that right, you've done 90% of the hard graft for understanding where your risk is fluctuating.
Yeah, interesting. Closing minutes. I just want to come back to you, Nick. Apologies, we're trying to get Benjamin back a few times, and it's proving difficult. So many apologies for that. But Nick, can I come back to you on that again? The question is, which metrics best demonstrate where cyber risk is being managed? Again, do you have a sort of particular approach for this, given what you've talked about the culture of Oxford Nanopore and so on?
So we're going to get Ben's typing this end. For us, so there are many, and Ash has probably got more data points than us. You could be measuring to the point of sort of fatigue and going blind from it all. We try and choose a sort of combination of a control that sort of means the most to somebody, and particularly when we're trying to sort of present to the board. Do they actually understand what that does without having to explain it for them? But also one that is of one of our sort of key critical controls, really. And if we can present around those and the trends of doing that, then that's the sort of sweet spot we try and find. Too many numbers, and they couldn't care less. Numbers that don't mean anything to them, that get lost on them equally. It make great for us. We could great sort of way of identifying the health of all our controls, and the more frequent we can measure, and the more live reporting we get through, the better. But when we're trying to articulate the risk upwards, it's just about comprehension, really.
Yeah, interesting.
And the statistics of it.
Interesting. Benjamin, I wonder, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Let's give one last try to Benjamin.
I right now it seems to be working.
Oh my gosh. All right, Benjamin, it is over to you for closing thoughts. You've been listening to bits and bobs of what we've done. What's your closing thoughts for us?
Of that the application internet gods just don't like me today.
No problem.
But what I've heard is absolutely brilliant. But it comes down to what story are you telling? How are we able to articulate that we are managing risk, we're identifying risk? Ash said already that we're not going to get to zero. Everything that we're doing is going to have some level of risk. So it's how do we tell the story? How do we show that we've actually got an understanding of what's out there? That we've built a program that is built to keep everything inside the tolerances that have been set by the executive leadership. We've got risk statements, we've got risk tolerances, all of those, and the programs we've built using the budget that's allocated have minimized the risk to be tolerable to the organization. But when it is no longer inside that, this is where that metrics and the measurements come from. Now we need to get some perspective here. Now we need to change some controls. May need reallocation of funds, may need additional funds or personnel as well. That's why we really need to be able to measure.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, Benjamin. Really good wrap up there for us. And apologies about the connection issues. Obviously not Benjamin's fault or indeed ours. It's the internet that sometimes does it. So there we go. Look, we've had some really good book recommendations. Thanks to our Tice audience for dialing in those. Tendai Chinamu says The Art of Invisibility by Kevin Mitnick. One on my bookshelf is a good book, actually, that. Rebecca Massey's Cult of the Dead Cow by Joseph Men. I believe I'm right in saying. I think I've got it, but I don't think I've read it. There's a difference between the books I've got and the books I haven't read. There's the Mitnick book from Mark Morrow again, which is The Art of Invisibility. Neil Martin also recommends Art of Invisibility. Benjamin, of course, had Sandworm, which I think Andy Greenberg. But I'm going to give the free signed copy of The Lazarus Heist to the person who successfully guessed it and did it before a couple of others. It was James McKinley who guessed The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll, which if you haven't read it, it's still a good read. It is dated now, but it's, as Benjamin said, it's a fun read, that one. And a good one to get your friends and family into cybersecurity, or at least to understand what the hell you do. So look, James, a signed copy of the book is will be on its way to you. I think we may be connected elsewhere. I'm on social media, so James, you can contact me directly, or we'll try and get the Tice people to contact you one way or another, by hook or by crook. We will get you your signed copy of The Lazarus Heist. Well done to you. Congratulations. Anybody else, by the way, who wants a copy of the book? Like the slide, I think, with the details on it. I'll stick a copy of the URL in the chat. May as well. Why not? Let's do that. So you can pre-order a copy there. It is out on Thursday. And it costs, it's not 20 quid, it's less than 20 quid. I think it's about £18. So look, there it is. If you want to buy now, fantastic. It'd be really great support. But don't worry if you don't. I'm sure there's lots of other books to read as well. Look, I want to also thank our guests this week. You've all been fantastic. Benjamin Call, VP Cybersecurity at Coates, Nick Harris, Director of InfoSec and Cyber Resilience, Oxford Nanopore Technologies, and Ash Hunt, who's Group Head of InfoSec at Sarn Group. Thanks to each of you. You've been really, really good. It's a great discussion. Thursday, my co-host Jenny is in the chair because I'll be at book launch thing. She's going to be discussing security assurance, identifying the gaps in your security controls, which sort of relates and goes on, tags on from what we've discussed here. So, folks, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Tice Talks every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. live. Thanks again, Benjamin, Nick, Ash. Have a great rest of the week and good to see you all. Cheerio.